So today we're going to be creating a practice value scale in Scratchart in order to get ready for our next major project. So you can create one with either hatching or cross-hatching marks today. I will let you choose, going either all in one direction or crossing in two different directions. But in your supply kit, you should have gotten a skinny strip of scratchboard paper and a little scratch tool. Now this is a homemade scratch tool that has a little sharp point on the end just made with a pen. So to begin your value scale, you're going to take a pencil and a ruler, line your ruler up where the 0 lines up with the edge of your paper, and make a little vertical tick mark every 1 inch. And this is going to leave you with a little small 1/2 inch section at the end. We're going to use that for our white value, just because it's smaller so it'll be easier to scratch out. And then take your ruler and make sure you have a very nice true vertical, and with your pencil draw a vertical line along each one of those tick marks, dividing this up into your value scale. Make sure everything stays nice and straight and that those lines don't get tilted or crooked as you draw them out. So there you can see my finished drawn out sections. So the first full square on this side, we're going to leave that as our black value, and we're actually going to start on the half square on the other side with the lightest value. And I'm going to choose to use just hatching marks going all in one direction, just to practice value without trying to add in any other textures. You could use cross hatching if you would like, but going in all one nice neat direction, I want to fill that space smoothly and completely. Now this homemade scratch tool is really great for very, very fine detail, but it is actually pretty hard to use for large areas of solid white. So as you're working with it to get this lightest value, work very carefully because that point can accidentally scratch through your scratch board and end up damaging the paper surface. So be really gentle and just experiment to sort of get a feel for how to get that smooth, scratched off surface. But don't worry if you make a mistake on this step. This is totally part of the learning process. You really sort of have to work with the material in order to get a feel for how and what you should do to make it work effectively. So once I have that first value laid in pretty well, I'm going to skip on to my next square and try to determine how big the value jumps need to be from one square to the next. You want each square to be completely filled with a smooth, consistent value. You don't want it to have patches or not be filled in entirely, say for example around the borders or the edges. You want everything a nice, smooth, flat value. So as I'm sort of jumping around and gradually lightening and deciding what that value structure should look like, once you have everything sort of mapped out pretty generally, I want to show you a way to go back and double check your work to see if it is accurately and evenly making value jumps. So what I like to do is cover up everything but 2 values and ask myself if those are distinct and different values from one another. If they are, you can shift up and look at the next 2 values. If those look distinct, move up and up and up your value scale. And as you do that, that's going to let you see any places where you maybe need to make small, subtle little adjustments. So for example there, I had just a few patchy places that I wanted to lighten just a little bit, just to smooth out that value structure in that square. And then that looks good. Now as I move up, I see that those 2 values look pretty similar, as well as those next 2. So what I need to do is figure out a way to spread those 3 values out. And with Scratchart, you can't make a value go back to being darker. All you can do is lighten up the values more. So I think to fix this and resolve that middle issue where those values are too close, what I can do is gradually lighten those second 2 and then lighten all the way up the rest of my value scale, just to spread those values out to make them each a unique and separate, distinct value jump. And gradually, lifting up lighter and very soft, delicate layers, you can see that you can make some adjustments and tweak things as you go. Now I like to double check things again just to really make sure that I'm happy with all of those value jumps, that each one is nice and distinct, and I think that that looks pretty good for my value scale. This is going to be a great reference as we're working on our major project and on the next step of our practice assignments. So the next thing that we're going to do is create a miniature practice scratch art project. So you should have gotten a small rectangle squarish piece of scratchboard about this size, and we're going to be using a found resource image to create a little miniature to experiment with the process and how to use scratch art before we start in with our big project. Now I want to show you a couple student examples. This was a past student example using a magazine picture, and then there you can see their finished result. Now this is a really excellent, high quality student piece, excellent rendering of texture and form and value, really great example. And then here are a few more that I thought in the past have also been really successful. A lot of students do portraits for this assignment, but you don't necessarily have to. Here is one of my teacher examples that I've done as a demonstration in the past. But one of the things we're going to be working with is value as well as mark making, marks that reiterate the shape and the form of the structure. So like those cross contour drawings, how the marks wrap around the three-dimensional structure. Now as you work with this project, these are all examples done by different students or myself, and you can see that they each have their own unique sort of take on how to create scratch art. Different processes, different kinds of marks, but they're each one unique and individual, and each one is really successful. So for today, what I want you to do is grab a magazine, and if you don't have a magazine, you could also find a resource picture from the internet as long as you can print it off. I'm just going to use a birding magazine that my husband has, something that I can cut a picture out of. And what you want to do is look for a photo that has good contrast and interesting textures. You don't want to use pictures that are like a drawing or an illustration, but you want to look for something that's actually photographic that you can cut out that will fit the size of your miniature small board. So for example, I like this picture of the bird. It's got a nice simple background, but it's got nice contrast. That would fit the size of my board perfectly, so I might use that as an example. I'm going to flip through and see if I find anything else that I like better. That owl would work great. That bird would work perfectly as well. I like those penguins, but it's a little bit smaller than my picture, so maybe not. But you can just flip through and find really anything. This could be a landscape, it could be a person, an animal, an object. Anything that you think would be interesting to practice on, again, that has good contrast and good textures. You may want to also think about what your major project is going to be, what you chose for that resource picture, and choose something of a similar subject that may help you practice to get better at it. So for example, if you're going to do a portrait, you may want to try out a portrait on this practice. So once you've found a picture that you like, I'm going to line my board up on top of it, my scratchboard piece, and trace around it, just so that way I know exactly where to cut it out to size. And then I'm going to cut that out with my scissors. And then once you've got that resource picture cut out, the next thing that you're going to do is just grab some tape. It doesn't really matter what kind of tape you have around your house. It could be masking tape or clear desk tape or washi tape. Anything like that will work. But you're going to line that up over top of your scratchboard piece, and on any side where you're not going to mess up by covering it up with a little bit of tape. It could be the top, bottom, left, or right, either one. You're going to take a piece of tape and cover up just a little tiny sliver of the edge, and we're going to make a hinge holding this picture on top. So I'm only covering up about 1/8 of an inch, just a little tiny bit, and then folding that tape over to the back side of the board. So most of it's on the back with just a tiny bit on the front. I don't really want to obscure my picture at all, which is why I'm putting such little on the front. And then I'm going to trim off any extra with scissors. And that's all that I want you to do today, is just pick out your image, and we'll be ready to work on that for our assignment tomorrow. And to turn in your assignment today, I'd like for you to photograph your value scale, your practice resource picture, and just have your name written on a scrap sheet of paper or a sticky note, and photograph those things all together where I can see everything clearly and upload that to today's assignment.